to our That's good to have a recording. I want to welcome everyone to our October 2024 Davis Police Accountability Commission meeting. Let's see. I appreciate folks for bearing with us as we try to get ourselves set up and ready here. I'm going to go ahead and go through. Well, I guess I called the meeting to order. I guess a minute ago at 6:35, and I'll go ahead and go through roll call. Let's see. Commissioner Wilson. Commissioner Sherman, myself, Commissioner Horton, I am here. Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald.
Present.
Commissioner Canning.
Here.
Commissioner Bliss. All right, looks like we're just waiting on Vice Chair Griswold. Does anyone want to make a motion for approval of tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll give that to Commissioner Canning. Any further discussion on the agenda? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, agenda approved. Brief announcements from city staff. Kelly.
I just have one announcement this evening, and you guys are all aware of this. I believe I sent out an email earlier last month. Chief Pytel will be retiring later this month, now that we're in October. And the city manager has named Deputy Chief Todd Henry as the incoming chief. So once Chief Pytel steps down, Chief Henry will step up. To that end, we can talk about this later in the long range, but I've talked with him about coming to the December meeting. Wanted to make sure to get on his calendar quickly. So we are planning for him, if you guys are agreeable, for him to come to the December meeting of the PAC and talk to you about his thoughts and visions for the department.
All right, thank you, Kelly. Mary.
I don't know if this is the time, but what I would like this commission to do is to pass a statement that we thank Chief Pytel for his service and wish him well on his retirement.
Just a motion?
Just as however we want to do it, to be able to, to say that that's what we wish.
Kelly, thoughts in terms of where on our agenda or?
Yeah, so we don't have that on the agenda for this meeting, and by next meeting it would be past
Late,
past
so
the
can't-
point. What I might suggest, two things. I believe we will be publicly recognizing Chief Pytel at the November 12th council meeting. So we could put something, when is your next meeting? Your next meeting would be before that.
Mhm.
So we could put something brief on the agenda if if the commission wanted to.
It's
the
not till
November meeting.
They'll do it in November.
Pardon?
The council is going to.
They're going to be publicly recognizing outgoing and incoming chiefs. So yes, so we could put something if the commission is so interested, we could put something on the November agenda for a motion or a vote.
To be included in the sort of list of acknowledgements in
Yeah,
the November
yeah.
meeting.
Yeah, it's not on the agenda this evening, and so I feel like
No,
it would be
I
appropriate.
just didn't know how to do it, but
So-
I wanted to make sure we did something to say.
And if the commission as a group is not interested in that, or if somebody wants to do something individually, you always have that option.
Yes, I at least myself and some other commission members are sometimes present at council meetings, so we can certainly, if that's not I don't imagine that it will be, but if that is not the commission's wish, we can certainly do that individually. Commissioner Canning?
Yeah, Kelly, I want to ask you a question. It's about the recommendation that the council made or the commission made last spring to add a new section to the surveillance ordinance. There was a motion, it was seconded, and we passed. And Commissioner Griswold and I wrote up a proposal to add a small section about transparency to the surveillance ordinance with the recommendation that the ordinance be amended to include this. I think we passed it here. I guess I'm more interested in knowing how recommendations we make to the council get to the council and how we can have an impact with getting them sort of on their agenda, perk up their ears a little bit and pay attention, so to speak.
Sure. So items go to the council in two ways. They go as informational with the minutes, and then they go for action items separately, and those are determined based on how the city manager and the mayor put together the agendas. For that particular one, that was shared with the police department and with the changing the website to make it, as you said, more transparent. We haven't done that yet. I mean, we've shared the information, but we haven't actually updated the website. But that we would see as being an administrative task that we would do without needing to have council direction. Changing the ordinance would need council direction. And I would need to go back and talk with staff, police department, and city manager to say, are we bringing the rest of that one forward or not? I think we had originally talked about, with Chief Pytel, talked about bringing it forward with some other changes he was looking at, that those haven't come forward. And now with the switch over, I need to regroup a little bit. So there's two different answers there for
Right.
two different parts.
Yeah, I know we've talked a couple times about possible changes, like the review part of the surveillance ordinance was sort of changed, but the ordinance wasn't changed. So I think that was part of the package. So-
Correct. It was looking at do we permanently change kind of the timelines?
Yes,
And then there was the website information.
website and transparency piece to the.
Right. So why don't I make a commitment to regroup on that and see what the next plans would be, next steps.
Great.
So I'll bring something back at the November meeting.
Thank you.
And I just remind folks to try to remember to bring up the Mary, which you brought up in the long range calendar, so that we make sure that we add it to the agenda for the upcoming meeting. Any other, I guess, questions is where we're off on Kelly's announcements? Okay. Any were you gonna say something? Okay. Any commissioner announcements? All right. So y'all know that I usually use this to highlight our observances. I'll try to quickly do that. Well, I guess I'll start off with, obviously this is October the 7th, and this is the first anniversary of that tragic day last year. I know that there's been a number of commemorations, observances throughout the community over the course of today, some on campus, some in the city. I think there's actually one going on right now that probably a good chunk of us would be at, were we not obligated here at this commission meeting. Anyway, so I know that there's, particularly with the new year so close, as Commissioner Sherman and I were talking about before the meeting started, I know that there's a lot of people who are still dealing with so much grief and pain with regard to that. And I want to, just sort of extend, our communities, our commissions, I assume, condolences and well wishes to the folks who are still going through that and experiencing that. The month of October is also National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Of course, domestic violence in the variety of forms that it takes still impacts a number of Davis residents. And, we can sort of think back to some of the incidents in our recent history of how making sure that we are preventatively and proactively tackling domestic violence is a really important thing that we address as a community, and making sure that all of us, including, spouses and kids and folks who are sometimes vulnerable to domestic violence, are safe and secure in this community. October is also LGBT History Month. And, I think it's important that we, number one, talk about the LGBT trailblazers in terms of our community's history, but also, the history of criminal justice reform throughout the nation and in our own community. There's so many folks who have, we would not be here as a commission probably without the legacy and work of so many LGBTQ plus criminal justice reform advocates. Lastly, last but not least, there's September 15th through October 15th is National Hispanic Heritage Month. And of course, our council liaison, her birthday, I think, falls during that time. Our city's first Latina mayor and city council member. Of course, we have on our own commission our former chair and commission colleague, Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald, who's led on 2 previous commissions prior to this one, and has a tremendous legacy of leadership. And I think, it might be important to note here, as we're talking about Hispanic Heritage Month, I'm always glad that Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald makes sure that we're outreaching to our Spanish-speaking population here in Davis as we're talking about how we inform folks about the public safety and accountability measures that are here and present here in the city of Davis. So that's the end of my acknowledgements for our observances. Any further commissioner announcements?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to thank you for acknowledging those special months that we have. And I also wanted to mention that on the school board where I serve, we talk about and recognize Filipino Heritage Month. And I say that because, well, it's an important month, but also, in the Central Valley, Greater Stockton, San Joaquin Valley, and Sacramento too, but in particular, San Joaquin Valley. I know that Filipinos have made such tremendous contributions. And I just want to recognize that and thank you for the other contributions that you mentioned too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any further, Commissioner Wilson?
Is it on now? Oh, it's on now. Okay. Sunday. And I think, at least in our neighborhood, it starts at 3. And I don't know if that's the standard starting time or not.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I forgot. At the back of the room, you'll see a bunch of boxes filled with bags of things. Those are for our 110 or 111 different parties that'll be taking place across the city in different neighborhoods on Sunday. They range in time based on what works for that neighborhood. They also range in sort of activity and what they might be doing, again, based on what that neighborhood wants. Ice cream socials, definitely the dessert ones seem to be a big hit. The Davis Neighbors Night Out is intended to help neighbors meet neighbors. All too often in the community, we're quick to maybe call 911 on a noise complaint or something like that. This is an attempt to get people out talking to their neighbors, maybe meeting some folks that they didn't know who are in their neighborhood. In particular, if there are students in your neighborhood and you're having one of these parties, that's definitely one of the intents is for the students to feel acclimated and welcomed into the community.
And I guess it might be, worth mentioning that I think as many folks are aware, this is a sort of a Davis version of the national sort of night out that is, an event that lots of law enforcement agencies participate in. And I think, the idea of it being when it is in the calendar so that students can participate. So it's a very, cross community sort of activity and a great one to participate in if you haven't before. Right. Other commissioner announcements? I note that our council liaison is not here, so I'll skip over that. And so we'll move on to general public comment. And so this is public comment on items that are not on our agenda, or of course, if folks are looking.
Have you done the consent calendar and I missed it?
I'm sorry?
Consent calendar? Oh, it went completely off my agenda. Never mind.
Okay.
Sorry.
If we were in council, we would talk about if we were going to move things from consent. Let me rewind back to that. So this is for items not on our agenda, or of course, if you're looking to engage the commission on items that are on our agenda, but you're unable to stay later on, we would welcome you to share those comments with us now, Commissioner, Trustee Jackson. Sorry.
Good evening, folks. My name is Hiram Jackson. I am on the school board, but my reason for being here is in my capacity as representing the Measure Yes on Measure T campaign. And if you're not aware of it, Measure T is local library parcel tax in order to fund extended access to the libraries. You may know that there is set to be built a new branch of the Yolo County Library System in South Davis. at Walnut Park, which is very much near Marguerite Montgomery Elementary. It is set to start construction next year, and it will take about a year to be built. Measure T is actually funding basically the ability to operate that library in South Davis. Now, if it is at a cost of $49 per parcel, or half of that, $24.50 for multi-unit dwellings. If it doesn't pass, then probably the likeliest scenario is some money from what that would normally go to the Mary Stevens branch would get diverted to South Davis to keep it open for a day or two, and then the corresponding reductions might reduce services at Mary Stevens. So potentially we are all impacted if it doesn't pass. And I just remind you that the Mary Stevens branch is at capacity on many school days, after school, and other days throughout the year. It provides summer activities for our kids. It is a complementary resource for improving literacy and reading, both for our kids and also for those who speak English as a second language, the ability to get books and literature and resources. It requires 2/3 vote to pass. So that means 65% doesn't cut it here. It has to get 66.6 to pass. I just also remind you that our libraries provide Wi-Fi internet access if your own internet becomes incapacitated. Also computer access. It's a cool place to go on hot days. There's community rooms available for groups to meet. And there's of course, November election is very important, and there's a lot of important races. And I'd ask you to tell your neighbors about Measure T, because it's they're at the end of the ballot. I hope that you all support it. The reason I'm here is because you're engaged citizens of the community, and so I think it'd be likely that you would vote, and I hope that you'll tell your friends and neighbors. And I just also point out there may be some up ballot races that will depend on our coattails. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome to the next public commenter.
Hi, my name is Dorda Jensen. I live in Davis. I wanted to read an email from Darren Pytel, the outgoing chief now, to Beth Bourne, a friend of mine who's going to give public comment right after me. It's regarding the September 12th back to school night at the high school, for back to school night for the parents to come and see what their children would be doing. And she attended, and then there was a kind of an incident that she felt her free speech rights were violated. So the next day she wrote an email to the police department, and that same afternoon, Darren Pytel, the chief at the time, wrote her back an email. So I'd like to read almost all of that to you for background. So this is what he said to her. Good afternoon, Ms. Bourne. Once again, you are confused about what a hate crime is and is not. You were not ejected from the school because of religious belief. You were ejected because of your conduct and the substantial disorder you created at a school-related event. Furthermore, you have a well-documented history of substantially disruptive conduct at school-related events that has nothing to do with you exercising actual free speech rights. Your right to speak does not supersede the right of school staff to conduct their work without substantial disorder. Furthermore, the school staff has an obligation to protect students, staff, and visitors from such egregious conduct. When you are told not to interfere with those obligations, you must stop, as long as you are on school property, which is not a traditional public forum for addressing one's ideas. If you choose to exercise your First Amendment rights, you must do so on a public sidewalk in front of the school or another appropriate public forum. If you want to engage with the school publicly, I suggest speaking, I suggest speaking at a board meeting, which is an open public forum and where you have a right to engage in free speech. And this is the last paragraph. All this said, the department has already begun an investigation into the matter, and we will forward the case to the district attorney for review. As you are aware, the district attorney acts entirely independent of the Davis Police Department, and they can take whatever legal action they see fit, even if it's entirely different than what I've said. Lastly, it's rather clear that your escalation of conduct is a problem and that you must act in accordance with the law. The superintendent, just like a police chief, has significant authority over how policy is discussed or not by subordinate personnel, especially at the schools. I suggest you direct your questions to district level staff in the future. Sincerely, Darren Pytel, Police Chief, Davis Police Department. So that's what he wrote, and Beth can tell you more. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to the next public commenter.
Thanks. I need to be able to see it. Sorry, I don't, okay. Well, I'm not ready yet, so I'm going to be speaking here, and can you just give me like a notice that says 30 seconds?
Please speak into the microphone so it'll pick it up on the camera.
Hi, good evening. My name is Beth Bourne. As you know, I'm a City of Davis resident for 20 years. I had 2 children in the Davis School District, and I'm a concerned mother. As you know, many children in this town are being sterilized right now with puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. We've had 7 girls, at least, already lose their healthy breasts to something called a top surgery, which is a cosmetic bilateral mastectomy that girls in Davis as young as 13 are getting. And I think you should be curious, right? Why do we have girls in Davis having their breasts cut off? So I'm going to give you some information, but first I want to have you listen to Chief Pytel, our police chief, talk about me and my concerns as a mother, knowing that children in Davis are being sterilized and losing their breasts. Here is Darren Pytel. Please listen closely.
And I don't know if it's Laura or Chief Pytel is better to answer this. Can you tell me if Moms for Liberty is an identified hate group or not? And could you let us know about that?
Certainly, they espouse ideas that are considered hate. Yeah, I don't know that there's much more to say than that.
Well,
that
is it true that that Moms for Liberty has been designated as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
So what you just heard right there was Chief Pytel, the City of Davis Police Chief, and I have the, I think, Assistant City Manager here, saying that I represent a hate group because I am a concerned mother who believes that children cannot consent to being sterilized or having their healthy breasts amputated. As you know, we recently had here in Davis, Natasha Polk. School district would not share this photo with me, but this is from her arraignment hearing. She is charged with raping a 13-year-old student. This is a Harper Junior High teacher charged with raping a 13-year-old student. So we know that we have teachers that are lying to parents. They're changing children's gender identity at school with new names, pronouns, letting them use the opposite bathroom or locker room. So think about this. We have a police chief that says it's hate for me to tell you that our kids are being harmed, but he says it's okay for teachers and school counselors to lie to parents. And you here are all appointed as an elected body to give input. So I'm hoping that you, because you are being charged with taking care of our community, that you will have the courage to speak out. You don't have to be a coward. We're hurting gay boys and lesbian girls by telling them they could be the opposite sex because they like wearing makeup, they like their nails manicured. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and go to our consent calendar. Does anyone want to make a motion for the approval of our September minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any further discussion on the approval of our September minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Minutes approved. All right, we're going to our police auditor update. I'm told, at least by Kelly earlier, that Mike is somewhere here on our screens. And so hopefully, there he is.
There he is.
Mike, take it away.
Thank you, Dylan. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Are you all hearing an echo? Because I am.
Oh, Mike. No, we're good. Your audio's good, Mike. Thank you.
Okay. It's not good on my end because I'm hearing myself talk like a second after I talk. So I'm confusing myself a little bit, but let's see if we can proceed. Anyway, good to see you all this evening. I just have a few things. One is as far as our plans, we have been obviously advised by the chief and others of the change in the leadership of the Davis Police Department. And our hope, although we haven't confirmed this, our hope is to sit down with new Chief Henry soon, perhaps in conjunction with the next PAC meeting in November. If we can get on his calendar, we're going to try to do that. No new complaints. One thing that perhaps I can just mention, just to give you again sort of perspective and the sort of the national, what's going on nationally. We are having our annual oversight conference next week in Tucson, Arizona, and I'll be there. And we'll be presenting on prosecutors' role in identifying and addressing misconduct by police and by prosecutors and by other participants in the criminal justice system. I'm going to be running a panel on that. But one thing that I think has really become top of mind among many oversight agencies throughout the country is a shift at the state level regarding support of civilian oversight. And while the state of California leadership in the Assembly, Senate, and the governor's office continues to be supportive of oversight, not so much in other states. You may have read about the verdict in the Tyree Nichols matter out of Memphis, Tennessee. That verdict was announced a couple of days ago. But what has not received as much publicity is after the Nichols incident came to light and the video shocked many folks, the city of Memphis decided they wanted to create oversight over its police department, which it did. And it was the first, I think it was the first city in Tennessee to do so. So Memphis got going. They created an oversight entity. They appointed commission members. They created an independent police auditor, I believe. And they staffed up the organization. Within a few months of that, the Tennessee legislature passed a bill that essentially outlawed civilian oversight in the state of Tennessee. So the Memphis oversight group was required to disband. And the oversight they had for a few months no longer exists. In Arizona, the legislature similarly passed legislation after Phoenix, who is looking at a consent decree by the U.S. Department of Justice and has negative findings regarding their practices, attempted to create oversight. And again, the state legislature challenged and tried to outlaw Phoenix's oversight. I think that one is still tied up in the courts. And then the most recent example, and perhaps the most concerning, because it's impacting a number of agencies that have been around for 20 years or more, is what the legislature in Florida did. They passed a bill outlawing effective police oversight in the state of Florida. Governor DeSantis signed the legislation. And so oversight entities in Miami, Miami-Dade County, Tallahassee, Tampa, and other jurisdictions are all in the process of closing their shops. Even so, some of them, as I said, have been around for 2 decades or longer. So it's momentum, and it's somebody who's been a practitioner of oversight for over 20 years, obviously, I'm quite frustrated and distressed by this. A lot of colleagues who I know who've been working in Florida on these issues for as long as I have are now essentially out of a job, out of a mission. And so the police are going to be able to do pretty much what they want to do in the states of Florida, Tennessee, and possibly Arizona as a result of this this movement. We're going to strategize, I think, next week at our conference and try to figure out what, if anything, we can be done about this. But there are other states that are also considering doing this, and it's going to be challenging, I believe, in the next few years to figure out how this works out. We may end up having a situation in the country analogous to what's going on now that Roe versus Wade has been reversed, where many of the red states will not allow oversight to exist in any form. We'll see. But that's the good news. And other than that, I don't have anything else, but it makes me appreciate what we have in this state and some of the counter forces that also exist in this country that are creating a challenge to ensuring that police agencies are part of any significant oversight process. That will end my remarks. I'm obviously available for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mike. Commissioner Canning.
Thanks, Mike, for your report. It's concerning. I have a question about it here in California, though. We have much more oversight than many other places, but in my perception, there's a big gap of it, which is oversight of sheriff's departments.
Right.
I know there's some counties, San Diego has a CLRB, I think it's called, which has some statutory authority to make the sheriff toe the line on certain things. Is there any movement that you know of, say in the legislature or at the local level, to increase oversight of our elected sheriffs? Thank you.
Yes, there is, although it's been halting. So you're right, San Diego has had some form of oversight for a long time. LA County, we started oversight in LA County over the Sheriff's Department in 2001, and they've had oversight ever since. And Orange County has had some form of oversight for a while. We are currently providing oversight for Santa Clara County and Santa Cruz County. But there are other counties where oversight has been promised, and the sheriff, when they were running for office, made statements supporting oversight. But those sheriffs have been in office for now going on 4 years, and we still don't see any real oversight. San Mateo is a good example of that. Alameda County, there was a commitment to do it, but it hasn't yet come into fruition. The grand jury in Humboldt County recommended oversight for its sheriff, and the sheriff said he didn't want that. And so it's been in fits and starts, but there has been some gradual increase in sheriff's oversight.
Any movement in the legislature to provide statutory support for that?
There was a bill passed that allowed and empowered counties to create inspector generals or independent police auditors, whatever you want to call it. That was enacted by the legislature and signed by Governor Newsom a couple of sessions ago. There also was a bill that allowed those IGs or IPAs subpoena power if the sheriff refused or declined to cooperate with the oversight entity. That actually is going on in Sonoma County, where the director of oversight there issued subpoenas for records. The sheriff's office did not provide them, and so now that oversight entity has filed a lawsuit, an attempt to compel the sheriff to provide those records.
Commissioner Bliss.
Mike, when the legislatures in those states passed this, what was the rationale given to them that this was necessary to outlaw? Right.
Yeah, I mean, the rationale I've heard for over 20 years is we don't need oversight. Oversight's not helpful. Oversight's intrusive. Oversight is meddling with police decision-making. And civilians who do not know anything about policing should not be involved in trying to tell a police department what to do. That's abbreviated version of the rationale.
Any other commissioner questions? I echo, Commissioner Canning's concern, with the trend here, though not super surprised that, Tennessee, the home of the Klan, Arizona, the home of Barry Goldwater, Florida, the home of Florida Man, is, moving forward legislation like this. But glad that we live in California, goodness, where that's not necessarily the trend line. Other things that we have to worry about, but thankfully not that at this moment.
I would agree. Sorry to interrupt, Dylan. I'd agree with you in part, although I have to say there's been even in California some retrenchment on some of the issues and concerns that certainly we have. It kind of flew under the radar, but Governor Newsom publicly said that Oakland should allow police officers to engage in more pursuits, even because they have a restrictive pursuit policy. That was put in place as a result of the monitor that they are certainly continue to be under in Governor Newsom's shift to the center and perhaps interest in running for president someday. And then, of course, one of the candidates for president, and I'll let you guess about which one it is, made a public statement the other day in which he said that the way to address the shoplifter problem was to allow police to have some quiet time in interview rooms with shoplifters and rough them up a little bit, and then the shoplifting problem would go away.
Among the most troubling comments I've ever heard from a candidate, frankly, ever. But Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald.
Very troubling. Mr. Giannakko, thank you for the report. And I too echo Commissioner Canning's concern. It'll be interesting to see if how legislation moves forward, contingent upon what happens nationally. It might impact that. And I also want to say, we're very fortunate to have officers that are very dedicated and do the job they were hired to do and are really into what our former commissioner on the HRC, Chithra Lakshmanan, would say. They're here to not be, what would she call it? She would say not police, were they police, but it's like community policing. They're friendly and they're here to help people. And we do have a lot of officers that way and who are like that. And I'm glad we do. But, having this ensures that those that don't have that intention stay within the boundaries or lines that they're supposed to, just like any profession. On that note, I had somebody from the community reach out to me, and I'm sure they'll be reaching out to you. I'm helping to direct them towards you if they haven't already. That in her words, she was attacked, somebody who was on mass attacked her door and started banging it and bending it, the metal door screen. And she called the police, and they told her they can't do anything about it unless she actually sees it happen. She said, well, I was on the inside of the house, of the apartment. So I was on the inside, I didn't have video and recording it. So I said, there's always different versions of things. It's best to reach out to, or ought to reach out to Mr. Michael Giannakko, and he will talk to you and assist you. And because she's concerned, I believe the police did arrest the individual eventually, but it's concerning, she said, because she doesn't want him to come out and harm her. So she's also working with the landlord, but she'll be reaching out to you, and I'll email you about that. So I'm really glad that you brought this concern up. It's something that we may in the future need to be addressing or working with the county on. Thank you.
I'll just mention briefly as we close out this item, in one of the first couple of years of the commission's existence, I think former Commissioner Kelly and myself had a meeting with some folks, some advocates in the suburban Atlanta area who were trying to start an accountability body of their own in their community. And I just remember how desperate they were just for a smidgen, of accountability and oversight in the law enforcement in their community, and how, again, lucky we are, as a number of people have mentioned, that we're in the place that we are in our own law enforcement and accountability here. Anything further? All right. I'm sorry. I forgot to take public comment on this. Any public comment on the independent police auditor report? All right, we'll take it back to the commission. Anything further? All right, we'll go over to, thank you, Mike. We'll go over to our regular item 7A, which is our informational item. And we're very glad to have Dana Bailey here from the city's Department of Social Services and Housing. As folks will recall from, our past meetings, I felt like I was getting a lot of sort of questions and concern, and I imagine that some of my colleagues here, from folks in the community who, were encountering unhoused folks, were wondering sort of particularly, post the creation of our new department, what the setup and what the game plan was in terms of how the city responded to issues regarding our unhoused population, particularly public safety challenges regarding our unhoused population. I think unfortunately there are, a number of rumors going around with regard to, hey, people are sending their unhoused folks to Davis. Of course, we had the Supreme Court decision recently that changed a lot of the dynamics with regard to how localities engage with their unhoused population. So it seemed like a good a time as any to have our new director here to come and overview the city's, operations and policies with regard to outreach and response to our unhoused population. Take it away.
Well, thank you for having me this evening. I really appreciate it. Again, I'm Dana Bailey with the 2-year-old Department of Social Services and Housing. I thought I'd give you a quick update on what's happening, talk about some of the issues that you addressed, and then take any questions that you might have. So the Department of Social Services and Housing, our mission essentially in a nutshell is to make sure that vulnerable populations that are low income have access to services and supports so that they can be contributing members of the community. That's really it in a nutshell. We do that through social services, a lot of support services that we have to individuals and families. We also do that through a housing lens. What kind of housing are we looking at in the community of Davis? Some of our goals earlier this year were to make sure that we are fully staffed, and we are almost there. We're very close. We are trying to improve the way that we collect data so that we can report back to the various commissions and to council on exactly what it is that we're seeing in the community. And then we really want to look at how do we facilitate public-private partnerships to do this work, because the city can't do it alone. It really is going to take the community to help us to come together and to address some of these issues that we're seeing. When the department was formed, one of the things that we looked at closely were what are the social determinants of health? How does a community determine that its citizens are doing well? What makes us healthy? What makes us contributing? And these are the social determinants of health as presented by the World Health Organization. So those are kind of the guiding forces that we keep in mind. How are we making sure our schools are safe and available to everyone? Do we have a housing pipeline for everyone that needs it? What do resources look like here in the city of Davis? So those are all things that we consider. And we particularly focus in on affordable housing in Davis and social support for people that are vulnerable in the community. I'm sure that many of you have heard about our point in time count. So our department is primarily funded by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The funding that they provide to the city is in our form is called Community Development Block Grant, and also Home Investment Partnership. One of the things that they ask communities to do is to conduct an biannual census of people that we believe are unsheltered or at the risk of homelessness. We conduct this biannual count every January. It's one evening in January, and that just gives us an idea of how many people we believe in the YOLO region and in the city of Davis are experiencing some form of homelessness. This year, we had a sheltered count. And when we say sheltered, that usually means somebody that's in an emergency shelter or in some sort of transitional housing. Here in Davis specifically, there are about 39 people that we counted. And then the unsheltered count are usually folks that we see that are living in a place that is not meant for human habitation. So in a car or on a street. We had about 123 people for that one night, for a total of about 162 people. And you'll see over the years that number has kind of creeped up. The last count, though, we're down a little from our last count, which was in 2022. But I will tell you, in working with our service providers and working with Yolo County, we know that's an undercount. But it is an opportunity for us to go out and work with people with lived experience, work with our providers, and do really a physical count of who we see. And that gives us a baseline for what we know. I like to tell people about what we call the housing continuum. And that housing continuum is how people move from being unsheltered all the way through up to home ownership. And what our department works on is primarily that piece that moves from being unsheltered up till getting to supportive housing. That's where most of our funding goes. And then the market takes care of the rest of the housing. But when people talk about the housing crisis, what we're seeing is there are blockages along all of this continuum. So when there are these types of blockages, it means that there's less housing availability for folks. It's much harder for people to get into housing. And folks that do have housing are very reluctant to let go of it. So that's contributing to a lot of what we're seeing as why people are either struggling to maintain the housing that they have, really afraid to lose that housing, finding it harder to get back into the housing market, or have just given up and are living on the street. The department we work with a number of different entities to kind of determine exactly what are we seeing in Davis. And so I thought I would talk about some of the challenges that we see. Housing insecurity is number one. That's the thing that drives a lot of what's happening right now. We're seeing more concern based on the Supreme Court's grants pass decision that you mentioned, and the governor's executive order that's having an impact on our unhoused community. We hear a lot about the variety and amounts of these funding streams that are coming out that are to address homelessness and housing. But a lot of that funding has what I like to call all that lovely government red tape that wraps all that funding up in a tight little bow, and it's much harder to get at. And sometimes it's very, very restrictive. We are seeing that our service providers really are struggling with capacity. Staff is moving around. This is a very stressful field. We're seeing people leave the field. And then finding operational support to actually keep their doors open is getting harder and harder to do. And finally, the availability for people with mental health issues or substance abuse disorder treatment beds are very, very difficult to find right now. We don't have treatment beds here in Yolo County. That is a severe gap, and it's one that we are working with the county to address so that we can get people the help that they need. But we're also seeing a lot of opportunities. We are seeing that there is more funding that's been made available for infrastructure, for building housing. So there's an uptick in interest in building affordable housing. We're seeing that there's a lot of collaboration between the different jurisdictions within YOLO. We do a lot of talking with our counterparts in West Sacramento and in Woodland to find out what's happening with them. How can we support one another? What are we seeing? So we're much more communicative with each other. We recognize that we're being very selective about the funding that we apply for because we want to make sure it has the greatest impact. And we're talking to our elected officials about, there are ways that the funding has to evolve. A lot of the funding that comes out is one-time funding, and that makes it really tough to budget and to plan and to have continuity of service. So, we're trying to figure out how we can relay that information to the state and to the feds so that we can find more consistent long-term sources of funding. And we've also recently completed a Davis 3-year homeless strategic plan, and I'll make sure that that's available to you all. This strategic plan will cover between 2024 and 2027. And it really is a roadmap to how we're hoping as a community, we can address homelessness. The next step for us now that we've got our strategic plan is to create a steering committee that will help us to implement actionable actions based on our goals that are really annual in nature. And then we are working very closely with Health and Human Services and with other justice-involved programs to really connect people to services. We're seeing that even though funding is changing quite a bit on the county level for a lot of the things that they provide, some of it is evolving in a very positive way. We've been doing some work with the probation department and their specialty court program and helping some of our unhoused folks that are justice involved be connected to housing and support services to help them to get on their feet. So when I first came to Davis, one of the first things that I asked our organizations post-COVID is a lot has changed. The environment has changed. What organizations have the ability to do has changed. So I asked them to really ask 3 basic questions. What can you continue to do given how your organizations have changed and what you're facing? What can't you do anymore? Things that you may have done in the past that you just don't have the capacity to do anymore. And what are you willing to do? If we work collaboratively, what can you contribute based on what your strengths are? And all of the organizations in town, our advocacy organizations, our service organizations, they're really taking those questions seriously and looking at, what is it that we have the ability to do right now, given how much has changed. And we really want people to focus on what their missions are. What is your service mission as an organization? Because the work is tough. It's changing, it's taxing, and you want to come in and be able to make an impact based on, what fits for where your heart is, if you're a faith-based organization and what your spirit tells you, and if you're a community-based organization, what you have the capacity to do. And so we also ask them to make it a point to try and center the voices of people with lived experience, because these are the folks that really know the ins and outs of what is impacting their ability to really to kind of manage themselves and sustain themselves. We are seeing that we've got many more of our community members in the homeless arena are really paying attention to what's happening on a city level, on a county level, because it all impacts them. They see it in the end. So they're asking us, well, what is this homeless strategic plan you guys are working on? And we've had a couple people contribute to the homeless strategic plan and sharing it with one another. So that's something that we find is helping us to make better decisions about what it is that we think is important. So with that said, I think that's about the end of that presentation. I did want to say a little bit about what we're experiencing here in Davis, because it's really something that's being experienced all over the region. With the grants pass decision, with the ability to respond to encampments in a different way. The larger jurisdictions, larger cities, they are making a concerted effort to help people to get back to where their home counties may be. We haven't seen a lot of folks being put on buses with bus tickets to come this way. But what we are seeing is a lot of migration, just in general. People are moving from the Bay Area, coming all along the 80 corridor. They may not stay, they may move to Sacramento, but we are seeing a lot of movement. That movement is hard on some of the people that are currently here. A lot of new faces, a lot of new folks that don't know the culture here in Davis, don't know how to integrate into that culture, and it creates a bit of a clash. So we're seeing some difference in that way. The one thing that we are encountering is, like I said, that collaboration between the jurisdictions, us talking to one another makes a huge difference. Because what we find is that when people move between counties, any benefits that they've had, any connections to caseworkers don't go with them. And if they need to reconnect to benefits, that's going to take at least 60 to 90 days in this climate. So we're also encouraging people to get to one of our service centers, and that would be Paul's Place, or to the respite center, so we can do an intake and we can do an assessment and find out what's happening with folks. We'll always make sure that people are fed, that they have a place to do laundry, that they have a place to connect. But the goal really is to get people to self-sufficiency. And to do that, we're encouraging people, if you've got a place where you have access to housing and a case manager, how do we get you back there so that they can continue to work with you? Because getting access to housing there's so many barriers to it. We don't want to be that break-in connection for people. We've got a lot of collaboration on the ground level. We've got a street outreach team here in Davis. We've got 2 folks that are based in my department. They work collaboratively with an organization called Downtown Streets Team. Downtown Streets Team also does street outreach. They also do case management. They have a pathway to employment for people. And they also operate our respite center. We also partner with the county with their mobile medicine team. So we go out to encampments, we see who's there, we try and connect them to services, try to see how we can get them on that path to self-sufficiency, and help them to get on their feet. And we know that, often there are a couple of things that we're seeing. There's a great concern about safety. And I'm hearing a lot from the community that it just doesn't feel safe. They don't know how to respond when they're seeing people that are unhoused, and it's worrisome. But I hear the same thing from the people that are having the lived experience. This is scary for us. A lot of the services that we had access to, we're finding that those are drying up, and it's getting that much harder to find housing. And now I've got a lot of new faces that I don't recognize competing for the same thing. So as providers, we're trying to kind of strike that balance of keeping the community informed, keeping everyone safe, and staying connected. And I think we do work closely with the police department, but I think Chief Pytel described it the best way to me, and it really resonated. Our role, my department's role, and our street outreach team's role really is engagement. we're trying to engage people. How do we talk with you? How do we bring you into the fold? How do we connect you to a case manager? How do we get you connected into the system? How do we get you your benefits? You don't have your ID? How do we get that for you? You need transportation? How do we get that for you? There's a lot of engagement happening on the ground level, and we do that together. But when we have a situation where there's compliance or enforcement needed, that's when we partner with the police department. Because in order to keep the people with the experience safe, in order to keep our workers safe, we have to have that relationship. And here in Davis, we've been really fortunate that, most of the time we can manage things with engagement. But when things tend to evolve, we know that we can rely on PD to respond and really listen to us, because we can explain what a situation is. And then if we need to escalate and have a clinician talk to someone because they're in crisis, they've got that in their toolbox as well. So all of this is how in Davis we're trying to form a network of support for everybody that's here. So I guess that's what I wanted you to be aware of. There is a lot of outreach that's happening. There's a lot of work with the county. There's a lot of work with law enforcement, and there's a lot of connection happening right now. We're just trying to see, how do we get more resources to make all of that happen? Oh, that's my spiel.
Thank you so much. I want to circle back to a point that you mentioned a second ago about sort of centering the lived experience of the folks that y'all are working with. When I was running for something, I won't mention what, a couple of years ago, a woman came to one of my meet and greets and shared a story about how her daughter had fallen into a substance abuse, issue and was temporarily unhoused. And so, most Davis folks are aware of the encampment along F Street, along the railroad tracks. And so, the daughter was living out there for a while. Thankfully, the daughter got her life, back on a different track. But the mother still had relationships with some of the folks that were out there. And she said, hey, if you want to go down and talk to some of the folks and, figure out how the city can better serve them, I can go down there with you, given that I have some relationships there. And I'm glad that I took up that opportunity, because what you mentioned there was the theme and the thread line with everybody that I talked to. Hey, I feel like so many of the services that we get are based off of some sort of state or federal mandate, or what the altruistic residents of Davis want to give to us or for us, rather than, what our direct needs are, and then what our needs are articulated by us. And so I think, to the degree that we can more heavily center those lived experiences, I think we can make better public policy. I have, as the originator of this agenda, I don't have a lot of questions, but I want to maybe ask one and then see if other folks have one. You mentioned, as I've mentioned a couple of times, that, nothing really happens here in Davis without a public-private partnership. And you mentioned, the expansion of Paul's Place, which I think is, one of the things that's, a flashing light in people's minds about public-private partnerships with homeless services here in Davis. Can you talk about some of the maybe on the horizon things that you're working towards in terms of public-private partnerships in the community?
Sure. One thing that we're delving into really deeply, there's a statewide initiative called CalAIM. CalAIM is really the state's mandate for health providers to provide Medicare and here in the state. Part of that provision is having services that are specifically to address the unhoused, housing navigation services, rent deposits, health connection to mental health services. So one of the things on our horizon is talking with the providers in town about how we can connect with this CalAIM initiative. Here in Yolo County, it's Partnership Health that is the primary recipient of CalAIM funding. It's how do we talk with them about what we need specifically here in Davis. So at the table, we've got Sutter is at the table with us having a conversation. Davis Community Meals and Housing. Communicare is at the table with us. YOLO Children's Alliance. We're all trying to determine what should it look like in Davis when all of us are working together, and how do we tap into those Medicaid resources, not only for the people that need it, because there are still a lot of people that are unconnected to healthcare. How do we make sure that we get them connected? And once they're connected, how do we get them connected to those community supports? So that's a big conversation that's happening right now.
Thank you. Other commissioners? Commissioner Wilson?
Hi, I live across the street in Old North, and we had a neighborhood meeting a couple of nights ago. And one of the things that we were talking about is, I believe it's the respite center.
Yes.
That's the place where individuals can spend the night, right?
No.
Okay, well, where is it?
So there's only one place in Davis that's got transitional housing, permanent supportive housing. That's Paul's Place, and that's on H.
Okay, so what we were actually talking about was animals.
Okay.
So as I understand from our conversation that there are, I'm going to use the word cages because I don't know what else, for if somebody goes there and they have a pet, they can't take their pet inside. So do the county animal services help in any way? I mean, like, is there any kind of neutering service for everyone, in ways that if their animals are being housed outside, somebody coming in and making sure that they're healthy and not spreading diseases, et cetera?
We're also very lucky here in Davis. We have there's a partnership with Mercy Veterinary Clinic, and they offer a program called DPAW. Please don't ask me to say what this, couldn't even tell you. But once a month, they conduct a clinic where if you are unhoused or extremely low income, you can bring your pet to be, they'll take a look at your pet. They'll make sure that they've got vaccinations up to date. And so that's really where folks go to connect on behalf of their pet. And that happens, right now it's happening at Paul's Place. And they're working out how to expand it a little. So yes, that is available.
Escamilla Greenwald?
DPAW. DPAW.
It's Davis Pet Advocacy and Wellness.
There we go.
Depot.
Thank you, DPAW.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. It's you're providing us with a lot of important information. I have a question about students. I was surprised to learn that I think there's somewhere between 96 to 98 unhoused students in our school district. Can you please share? Yeah, Davis, yeah, K through 12.
Yes.
Unhoused students. Can you please share what is being done? And I understand that some of them, they're unhoused and some, I don't want to get the two, maybe you can elaborate. Unhoused and some are in foster care. So I don't know how that's differentiated.
Different things.
Yeah, and if you could elaborate on that, please. Thank you.
So most school districts have what they call a McKinney-Vento officer. And that officer is specifically there to help families that are unhoused and children that are unhoused, and to help them to maintain a education plan. People tend to move around. So that McKinney-Vento officer is usually the first point of contact for kids in school to kind of see what's going on with them. What if they're coming from someplace else? How do we, if you're moving into the district, how do we support you? That's generally how districts work with families. And we, from our department standpoint, the school district is the expert. They are the subject matter experts, and they have more access to services to support the student. What we may do is partner with them. If it's a family, we can partner with a family to see if there's something else that might be available to a family, particularly around housing. But they take care of the education portion, and then we talk with the family about their housing and support situation. And we'll also often work with the Health and Human Services Agency to do the same thing. Health and Human Services Agency has part of one of their branches is working with transition age youth. That's generally foster youth. And that's also especially, it's also a mandated service that's provided by Health and Human Services Agency. So usually in our network, if we come across children that are unhoused or families unhoused or foster youth that are unhoused, the first call that we make is to the county. to see if people are connected, and if they have access to the benefits and supports that they need.
I'm sorry, it's a, what the name is, a what kind of officer?
It's a McKinney-Vento. Yeah, it's a 1974 piece of legislation that really addresses unhoused people, and specifically they call it McKinney-Vento in the DJU in the school districts because it's tied to that HUD program.
Thank you. Other questions? Commissioner Canning? Oh.
Yeah, I have more questions than I can.
Mhm. 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 Yes. So fortunately, UC Davis has what they call their Aggie Basic Needs Office, and you probably are familiar with Rob Davis in that group. For our department, our HUD funding does not extend to students. HUD doesn't allow that. But it's because students have access to a separate sort of pot of funding for services specifically to them. We often do work with the Aggie Basic Needs Office, and we try and refer students to the Aggie Basic Needs Office because they have access to those specialty services just for them. And oftentimes they can do a lot more than we have the ability to do. So the Aggie Basic Needs Office has been really, really successful.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Griswold?
Thank you. Hi, thank you so much for coming. This is
Sure.
really informative. I wanted to ask, and I'm sorry if you already mentioned it, but like you were saying, Paul's Place is the only specific housing. How many people do live there?
So they are full. There are, I think it's 40 total units at this place. Yeah, about somewhere between 36 to 40, I think. On the first floor of Paul's Place is a resource center. That's where people can get access to, a connection, case management, and so forth. The second level is transitional housing. People can stay for a short period of time as they're also getting on their feet. A lot of times a caseworker will continue to work with them to see if there are other housing that's available to them either in Davis or in other locations. And then the top 2 floors are permanent supportive housing. So people can actually stay there once they've kind of been through their program. It's a really unique model. And so far it's been very successful. Yeah. Four emergency shelter beds on the first floor. Yes. So that model is it's been very, very successful. They're the only location that we have in town where there is that type of housing. The respite center is really just that. It's a homeless navigation location. People can be there from 8 to about 4 o'clock. And again, they're connected to services. They get laundry. They get I don't want to call them meals ready to eat, but anything that's portable because we don't cook there. And what we find is that between the clientele at the respite center and at Paul's Place, there's a lot of back and forth. And so the staffs at both locations often spend a lot of time talking with one another about, what they're experiencing with people, what services they provided, so that we can fill in any gaps. But
Thank
those are
you.
the 2 primary ones in town.
And then I was hearing you say how like housing is kind of like the number one thing you want to get people on that path. So where else are you sending them? Because that's not very many.
Yeah, and
spots.
it does depend. One of the trends that we're seeing more seniors, more people with really untreated health conditions. Sometimes we have the ability to get people into nursing homes, temporary nursing facilities, we we try to connect folks to wherever there's any availability of housing. West Sacramento has stood up a number of hotels that they've purchased. So sometimes they have space and we will call there. Woodland has Fourth and Hope, where they've got a large shelter and some permanent units. And so we'll try to move people into there. It's honestly, it's tougher in Davis because if there are units that are inexpensive, they're filled very quickly with students. And so it is harder for us to find housing for people that have needs that really require more support. It's something that we're thinking about, and that's why we're out looking for all those resources right now. You know, what can we apply for so that we can start building some of the housing that we need? And how do we reserve that housing for people how do we restrict it to folks that either income qualify or maybe because they have severe mental illness or substance abuse disorder, how do we make that available to them? Yes.
So just in addition to everything that Dana has just said, I would want to add, so Davis Community Meals and Housing operates Paul's Place. They also operate Creekside and Cesar Chavez Plaza. Those are two all affordable developments that have some really, I say, high levels of affordability. So they take some of the lowest income folks. To Dana's point, they're full and it's hard to find additional space. But there is that, that continuum that is envisioned where Davis Community Meals maybe sees somebody at Paul's Place, maybe they're in the transitional program, they do really well and they can kind of try to move them into a Creekside or a Cesar Chavez unit. We also have throughout the community a whole other spectrum of capital A affordable housing that is income restricted and subsidized based on the household or the individual's income. As Dana said, there's not enough of it and they're full. But the communication that she and her department have with all of the different providers, including those affordable housing providers, is what's helping create this kind of network or web where the goal is, as she said, trying to get all of those people who need whatever it is that they need to make sure they can get it as expeditiously as possible. But we don't have enough.
Thank you. That provides like a good picture, like for what you're describing as kind of the goal being self-sufficiency. And what about with folks who they're never going to be self-sufficient, whether it's just after decades of homelessness, they can't find a job, or whether health conditions or mental health issues or substance use disorders, et cetera. What might be sort of a pathway in that regard?
So if I had that answer, I'd be on a beach and you'd be on my book tour. And that is something that all across the country we're grappling with. The model that we've adopted here in Davis, and that's a national model, is called Housing First. And the Housing First model says it's hard for people to get on their feet if they're not housed. If I'm not stable, if I don't have a place to rest my head, how am I supposed to work on myself? So the HUD has identified Housing First as the model and policy that they want everyone to adopt to. But I always say that, what they've focused on is the creation of the housing, and the part that they haven't gotten to yet is the support. And that's a huge gap, because you can't hand people a set of apartment keys and say, okay, good luck. It just doesn't work like that. You've got to have the support of a provider network to help people to stay housed. It's just, it is very difficult right now. And to your point, we also have not addressed some folks that just we will always have to care for people. Some folks will always have to be cared for. Our network does a good job of trying to identify those folks. And when we do identify them, as a region, we do what's called case conferencing. We make sure that we get releases of information so the person that we're speaking about knows that we're talking with professionals about their situation to see how can we come together to support and when can we bring them to the table to have that conversation. But that case conferencing is critical so that we know if anyone at the table has access to some kind of resource for someone, wherever that resource is, we can work together to try and get that person placed into that resource. We've had a number of folks that have come to town, and we've found that they have housing and case management in another town nearby. We will call their case manager, and oftentimes, I can't tell you how many times we've had a couple of folks from Santa Cruz drive up to come get their folks. You know, so that we have that kind of relationship with the surrounding community, so and with other jurisdictions, so that when we've got someone that's in that situation and they've got resources someplace else, we want to get them back to that resource. How do we do that? And I think people are often surprised to hear how many of our unhoused people here in Davis are from Davis. They're from Davis. They went to school in Davis. They have family in Davis or nearby, and often will connect with their family at the respite center or at Paul's place. It's just they're not ready or equipped to make that transition. And that's why we try to be there. So when people go, okay, what can we do? We're there to kind of support them in that. And Paul's Place and Davis Community Meals and Housing and Downtown Streets team would be very disappointed in me if I didn't say that we don't expect perfection. It's really difficult to transition from a place of scrambling for your survival to coming inside. It's just a really hard leap to make. For our street outreach teams, we know that it often takes at least 8 attempts before we're able to get some to even trust us to give us a name. You know, that takes a while. And then once we've done that, you know, we can get people, we can help them to get on their feet, but people relapse because they're human. You know, and folks don't always make decisions that we may make, but they're their decisions. And so we allow people the agency to make decisions about their lives. And when they're ready, we're there to support them.
So unless some of my colleagues who haven't asked a question yet have a question, I'm going to try to get in one more of mine and then we'll go back to Commissioner Canning. But any other folks who haven't asked a question want to get? Okay. So I want to circle back to the respite center for a second and ask if, you know, a lot of people have, you know, come to me, you know, hey, these hours are not what they need to be. So can you talk about just I don't know, the relationship or the dynamic between the hours and then the extent to which when we're not at a time where the center is open, where people are sort of, you know, congregating or camping sort of in the surrounding area and sort of, you know, there's obviously a number of people in the immediate neighborhood of the respite center who have, you know, expressed concerns about that dynamic. Can you talk about how the hours sort of play into that?
Sure. So I can talk about the capacity to provide the hours that are needed. What we're really talking about is, do we have the resources to keep it open? Can we keep it open evenings and weekends? That means adding staff. At minimum, we need 2 staff at the respite center to make it function. You need someone that's doing the conversation with folks, somebody monitoring the grounds. Even better if you got someone that's outside that can kind of help out. So the resources to keep it open for the length of time that folks are interested in, we're we're finding it. We're trying to find that funding right now so we can do it. And then also having the provider, Downtown Streets team, you know, having their staff available on weekends and nights, that's quite the ask. And it's also quite expensive. And I'm always reluctant to expand services if I don't have a way to sustain it. If I can't keep it going, it's just unfair to people to pull back some services. So if I can get what I can during the day, make sure people have what they need so they can keep themselves safe at night and on the weekends, Downtown Streets team and Pulse Place spends a lot of time preparing people for that time.
As a council member Partita, and I think maybe even Kelly knows, you know, one of my biggest concerns for your department was, oh, shoot, so much of this, at least at the beginning, is ARP funding. I'm like, oh, are we going to be on a fiscal cliff at a certain point where so many of the great things that we've sort of built up in the community are going to be, you know, out the door in a second. So yeah, sustainable funding is certainly really important. Commissioner Canning?
Thanks. I have two questions. One, I think simple, and the other one maybe a little less so. Where can we find the strategic plan?
It's online. And
Okay,
it's,
so maybe Kelly could send the
yeah,
link to us.
I'll make
Okay.
sure that you have that.
Okay. The other question is, well, it has to do with, I guess, downtown services or whatever. I have a friend who called me about 3 weeks ago, wondering how she could get some help because she's a small business person downtown, and she had an unhoused person camping on her front door. Somebody else was putting, you know, their belongings behind the building, that sort of stuff. She was kind of frustrated because she was getting referred only to the police. And she wondered, she called me because she says, well, you're on the Police Accountability Commission. I said, well, yeah, I have a lot of sway. So maybe you could enlighten me and other members of the commission about what happens in a situation like that. She was unhappy because she thought maybe there was a homeless coordinator who could come down and maybe, I don't know, do an intervention. Who knows? But yeah. So maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
And I can.
Thank you.
We are hearing from the business community. Like I said, we are seeing some things change. So we're working to address that. One thing that we're working on is to create a mechanism for people to report what they see. We're talking about through the My Davis app, how we can have a uniform My Davis. It's really it's a community resource app, so people can, it can report. We're working on tightening that up a bit. So when a call comes in, it's diverted to the right place, because the first point of diversion is usually to our homeless outreach team. And that would either be the city's team or to Downtown Streets team. And they will respond. Now, again, it's just 2 people. And we get a number of calls from the downtown and from other areas, from encampments. So what we try to tell folks is anywhere between 24 to 48 hours, that's when you can expect a response. And that's for engagement. If you've got someone at your business or that you're seeing that's in crisis, that's a call to 911, because they're the first place they have the compliance and enforcement ability to kind of let folks know that behavior needs to change. We need to get compliance, or we may have to enforce. The first attempt is to get that engagement piece. And so we'll often deploy our street outreach team to go out and see what's happening. It's 2 people. And it's our 2 staff and also Downtown Streets team, that provider. They have 2 programs that they operate. One is it's a volunteer employment program, where they're teaching people basic life skills. They go out and they clean up the downtown. They collect trash. They're learning how to come to work on time, how to work on a crew. As they get better at those things, they kind of move up in the organization. First level is the folks you see in the yellow shirts. That's the first level. Second level is the folks that are in the green shirts. They're actually running a crew. And so they try and deploy throughout the downtown so they can do some of the cleaning in those areas, but also engage with the folks to find out what's happening with them. So we're talking more about how do we expand that. And we will be creating information guide for the businesses to kind of explain to them, this is what you can do, this is who you can call, this is how you can keep your business safe, and what you can tell your employees to keep themselves safe. So that's in the works, hopefully within the next 3 weeks or so. Oh, yes. Yeah, we're 6. Yeah, 6 and mighty. We're working our way through. And then the police department also has a clinician on staff. That clinician is specifically for people that are in crisis, and they also respond with in tandem. Including me.
I feel like there needs to be like so much more publicity for the Downtown Streets team, because, you know, I was knocking on doors, what was it, just last weekend, and someone was like, oh, well, there needs to be this thing where, you know, unhoused people can get a job and, you know, can get back out there. I'm like, no, we have it. It exists right now. So I hope more people can learn about that already exists. Oh, go ahead.
If we see a crisis that may need the help of mental health professional with the police department. I just happen to be parked next to Wells Fargo, was going to go in, and I see all this drama unfold. Someone running away from them and running in between cars. I thought they were going to get hit. I was like, oh no. Clearly there needs to be some intervention.
Right.
So I called, but then they said they actually stole something from someone and were running. That's fine. But still, there needed to, you could see that there needed to be some intervention. Do we call 911 to let them know?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
If
That
you
we've
see-
observed this.
If
but
you've observed
the-
something.
But
yeah.
it appears that
Mhm.
they're not just running, they are somebody that appears to need
Right.
some kind of intervention.
Right. And if
Eh,
you see someone that you
mental
believe
health
that someone's
intervention.
having a mental health crisis,
Yeah.
call.
Okay.
And they'll deploy probably the clinician to come take a look to see what's
Okay.
happening.
Okay.
Oftentimes we'll co-respond, the street outreach team will co-respond.
Okay.
And oftentimes we know who the person is, so we
Okay.
can see what's happening with them.
Mm-hmm.
Both Paul's Place and the Respite Center maintain meds for folks. We'll hold them for folks sometimes. So we can talk with them about that. But usually it's dispatch will kind of make an assessment and can help determine, is this street outreach or should we send a clinician by asking a few questions?
So I to the point of like the confusion over who to call, and that seems to be universal in the community, because people don't want to call the police because they have these concerns about the police and the unhoused population. And so I think maybe there has to be more education around, just call 911 and that number will get you to the appropriate place. They're not going to call the police are not going to go out first unless it's warranted.
Yes.
Unless
absolutely.
it's warranted.
Mhm.
And I think, maybe people get hung up on, well, who's going to make the determination about whether or not it's warranted? And I think this is where maybe this commission can help in building that trust with the community and getting information out, because we are working really hard to make sure that we are sending the appropriate folks out there.
Absolutely.
So I didn't know if anyone had, okay. So I wanna, you mentioned blockages in the housing continuum in your presentation, and some of the dynamics or sort of, situations in our community that have sort of created or, intensified those blockages. Can you talk a little bit about some of the efforts y'all are perhaps already engaged in, or, over the horizon in terms of unclogging those blockages?
Right. So a lot of it is trying to work with developers to build more affordable units in town, finding the funding to support the development of affordable units in town, one thing that it's on the horizon for us. We've got a number of complexes that are probably getting close to the end of their useful life. So, how do we help with potentially rehab or what other things can happen? It really is at this point, because there's so much attention and I was looking at I brought this little thing because the state is releasing all of the notice of funding opportunities that are out there. We're keeping an eye on what those funding opportunities are, when we can apply for funding, and what makes the most sense for Davis. Because it really does become, can we, working with the university and what they're doing, can we make sure the students are served there so that we can kind of focus on what's available here in town for everyone else? And then making sure people get to the kind of housing that they need. If you need supported housing, how do we do that? If you're a senior and you may need to transition away from maybe your 2,400 square foot house, you just don't need anymore. Is there some way that we can talk to people about shared housing? Right? What options do we have? So we're looking under every rock that we can find.
Thank you. Other questions? Go ahead.
So like 100 years ago, there were boarding houses.
Yeah.
Is that anything that is an option?
So there's an organization that's coming to Yolo County. They're called BACS, Bay Area Community Services. And one thing that they do is they purchase housing, single family homes, but they rent the rooms out as shared housing. So, and they also offer a staff person that's a support person on site too. So yes, there are entities that are looking at that. People are, there are more options for accessory dwelling unit creation. So we're trying to see what models work really well. And a city I used to work for, one thing that we were promoting was we were looking at the shared housing model. So we were going to seniors that we knew were, had excess housing and saying, if there was a college in the town, if we had students that could live and rent a room from you and provide you with support, would you be interested in that? And the seniors all said, not at all. Because kids are loud and I don't have any anymore. I'm not interested. But you know who was interested in it? Empty nesters. And they were saying, it's too quiet in my house and I'm willing to do that. So it's talking to these different groups to see what's a fit where and really kind of expanding what it is that we offer.
We're hosting an event in, I think, February, sort of, yeah, setting that date, coming soon. And I wonder if yourself or someone from your organization might be able to share a bit. It has to do around the theme of kind of what was being brought up, like when there are situations, whether different things that happen where calling the police is not the best option, where it's not like that, like as you described, compliance and enforcement, that's what's needed. So how to, for the community to know what resources are out there. I mean, I'm a public defender in Sacramento County and I've worked with homeless folks for decades. Before that, many people whose lives have, police have been called and they've been then the compliance and enforcement kicks in and their lives are made exponentially worse because of maybe it's a minor drug charge, maybe it's something else that escalates and then they're in jail and then they lose their housing and then, that snowball effect.
Cycle.
So I guess I'm saying all this to look forward to hopefully future conversations around exploring that, what options do exist already and even dreaming of what other options might exist for the future as well. So thank you. I've learned a lot from this whole presentation and
Good.
hopefully continue to be in partnership.
Let me try to run through my last couple of questions quickly. You mentioned that, a lot of the grant funding was really restrictive. Can you talk about maybe like what some of the restrictions are that like we as a city aren't able to meet? And so I'm just trying to like get a little
Sure.
bit of a clearer picture.
What it looks like. So there was a recent grant that was released. It was quite a bit of funding. It was to respond to encampments. And the funding was available to do the outreach to the encampment, to staff up so that we can go out and see folks. But one of the requirements was if you are doing the engagement, you have to immediately place that person into some form of housing. We can't meet that metric, so we're seeing those kinds of restrictions, or there's funding available for the development of housing, but the housing has to specifically serve just people with severe mental illness or substance abuse disorder. And so yes, it's there, but until we can actually find a provider partner that can kind of come alongside with that piece too, we're trying to make sure that it's a fit, that the funding we apply for is a fit and we can meet the metric. So what we don't want is to apply for it, get it, and then have it snatched back. Yes. Mhm. Yes. Mhm. Mhm. Involved. Mhm. So I know our outreach team and downtown streets team, they've referred 15 people over and 10 of them have been placed into the program. And that's since March. In partnership with probation. Yeah. It's called the Specialty Court Program. And it's specifically for people that have been previously justice involved. And so what Downtown Streets team does and our street outreach team and Pulse Place, what we do is try and refer them to that program where there's an intake and assessment to see if it's a fit and if the person is willing to participate in the program. Because there is a time commitment. I think it's a 6-month program that they have to be willing to participate in. But during that period, they can receive housing. And we've had, of the 15 we've referred, 10 have been enrolled in the program. Yes, this is a probation program. It's Prop 47. Mhm.
That was a good segue into one of my other questions because I was going to ask you to talk a little bit more about some of the work that y'all do with justice involved people. And so maybe are there other programs beyond the one with probation that y'all engage in?
It's mostly a partnership right now with probation because they've got the funding source that supports it. And we work with the DA's office as well. But it really is, it's a network of services and they're primarily county based, but we do a lot of referrals to those programs.
Okay. And this last one might be more of a Councilmember Partita or Kelly question. But you mentioned, Ms. Bailey, the sort of issue with or your engagement with sort of the state folks about making sure that our funding for homelessness services was more long-term and sort of easier for y'all to plan and make the best possible services. And so I'm wondering, you said that y'all are engaging with the state folks, and so I didn't know if that meant that this item was something that was on the council's ledge agenda. Okay.
No, and it's from our perspective, it's really supporting the mandated services that the funding is going through, like Health and Human Services Agency. I know that they're it's CSA, it's the Community Services Advocacy. They're the ones that are responsible for the Health and Human Services throughout the state, the 27 branches. It's their advocacy group. One of the things that they're pushing for very hard is one, could you streamline the paperwork so that it's universal? That's a problem for everyone. And the next push is there some way that the funding can go beyond the 1-year release that we're seeing? They've had a source of funds. It's, again, my acronyms are all mixed up. We call it HAP. There were a number of rounds of HAP. We're now in round 5, and each release it's only for a year. We're never sure if it's going to come back again. And then sometimes it's revised to be more restrictive. So I know CSA and the Health and Human Services Agency, Behavioral Health, they're asking for the state to take another look at how they're releasing the funding, and to take another look at the barriers and paperwork that they have to address it.
I mean, should there be a more like formalized ask in this area?
I think that would actually have to come from the CAO, the county administrator's office, and because they have oversight over the health and the human services agencies.
Okay.
And again, because the mandated services are there, they have more oomph
Mhm.
and to help the state,
Mhm.
particularly HCD, Housing and Community Development, to work with them to streamline what's out there. And I know that there have been talks about streamlining because it is universal throughout the state that this is an issue.
Okay.
But they're working on it.
Yes, more work to be done. Thank you.
Yes.
Other questions? If not, I'll take it to public comment. Public comment on our informational item this evening. If not, we'll take it back to the commission. Any final questions, comments? None other than thank you for spending an evening with us and informing us. Like I said, this is there's really sort of no neighborhood of Davis where this isn't a topic. There's no sort of, cohort of people that, aren't sort of discussing how the city can be doing things differently or what we can do to step up our game in this area. So again, appreciate your sharing some time with us and a lot of information with us this evening.
Happy to be here.
All right. So we'll go on to subcommittee updates. And the only one that we have on the agenda this evening is about our outreach event that Vice Chair Griswold mentioned earlier. Any updates from y'all? No? Oh, I'm sorry, Kelly? Go ahead.
Just to confirm, so we've reserved the Veterans Memorial Center for Wednesday, February 12th, which was 2025. Blah. Which was the date last meeting that you guys said was your first choice. So that one is reserved for the PAC with the idea of being like a 6:30 to 8:30 kind of a meeting. If you think about that and you change your mind or want something different, subcommittee, let me know, and we'll go a different path. But for right now, that's what we're looking at.
Can you mention the times again, Kelly?
So we've reserved it for the evening. So with the assumption that it would be like a 6:30 to 8:30 meeting, but we can be flexible with whatever the subcommittee recommends and the commission decides.
Okay, thank you.
It didn't sound like there was a run on the facility for that evening, so we're good.
Anything else on the outreach event? Okay, all right, thanks, folks. Any public comment on the outreach event in hopefully late winter? Okay, so moving on to our long range calendar organizing. I know we at least have one item that we need to add to the agenda, but anything beyond that in terms of future agenda items? I know we also talked about having Deputy Chief I'm sorry. Well, I guess at that time he'd be Chief Henry come to our meetings. And so that commissioner should expect to see that pretty soon. Anything else that we need to add on to an agenda? Don, Commissioner Sherman.
Yes, thank you. Did we hear tonight that we're going to have the new chief with us in December?
Yes, Kelly mentioned, that is that's what we should expect.
Okay, so
I'm assuming that is agreeable to the commission. So,
Yes.
okay, I will respond to
all right.
Chief Henry.
Yes. Any other items? Public comment on our long range calendar and upcoming meeting agendas? Anything further from the commission? All right, moving to adjournment. Anyone want to make a motion for adjournment? Oh, I'm sorry, Mike, did you have something? Okay. I want to know. Yes, right. Anyone want to make a motion for adjournment? Is there a second? Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. All right, meeting adjourned. Right.
Good night, all.
Good night, Mike.
Thank you.